Well, welcome and good afternoon, everyone, to Animal Protection of New Mexico and Animal Protection Voters Annual Meetings. I'm Dorothy Hutchinson, the Chief Development Officer for the organization. I thank you so much for being here with us today and for your support, without which this work would not be possible. The people and animals who call New Mexico home have faced unprecedented hardship in 2020. Yet hardship can bring out the best in people. And 2020 also saw many powerful outcomes for New Mexico's animals and those who care about them. Our Executive Director, Elizabeth Jennings, along with several staff members, will talk about what 2020 looked like for APNM and what's in store for 2021, followed by a Q&A session. And promptly at 5 o'clock, our Chief Government Affairs Officer, Jessica Johnson, will highlight past legislative successes and discuss the crucial 2021 New Mexico legislative session. There will be a separate Q&A session for APV as well following that presentation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our Executive Director, Lisa Jennings, who will get us started and take us through today's Animal Protection of New Mexico's annual meeting. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Dorte, and welcome to everyone for our 2020 annual meetings. Really excited to have you participating. I wanted to start today's presentation with this quote from Martin Luther King Jr. For those of you who have been animal advocates for a long time or those who are just starting out, I think it's really important to realize that the work that we do is by design. It's difficult to do, and to not get discouraged by the barriers and other obstacles that get put up in front of us. And in fact, this is what we're known for, is that we don't give up. And as Martin Luther King Jr. says, change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but it comes through continuous struggle. And so those who have been struggling with us all these years know that this is what we do. We struggle and we eventually succeed. And that's because of your participation and all of the resources and capacity that you help us bring to this very honorable work. Next slide. I just want to remind our supporters that our vision for New Mexico is to make humane the new normal, rather than some of the terrible situations that we know exist for animals out there. We want to make sure that no matter the animal, no matter the circumstance, that the reality for that circumstance or animal is a humane reality. And for Animal Protection of New Mexico and Animal Protection voters, our operational focus is to make an impact and to be sustainable in this work now and into the future. Next slide. Many of you have seen this graphic before. I won't go through it in a lot of detail, but it's just a reminder that this wonderful collaboration that we have in New Mexico between Animal Protection of New Mexico and Animal Protection voters is just this beautiful system of tying our policy work, our legislative work, and our program services together to make the biggest impact on the ground for animals. And so tying in Animal Protection voters' legislative work and their electioneering work to the wonderful program services that our staff provides for people and their animals in our community, they come together to make an unstoppable trajectory to better situations for animals on the ground in New Mexico. So the first thing I'd like to do before I cover 2021, before I cover the achievements of 2020, is I'd like to talk about what the impact and operational goals will be for 2021. So first of all, we have a goal to pass a bill called Roxy's Law that's going to ban traps and poisons and snares on public lands. And you're going to hear a lot more about that in the coming slide presentation that Jessica's going to share with us. We're going to continue our very comprehensive equine protection efforts. that have been just remarkable, particularly because of COVID-19 in 2020. And we're going to expand our partnerships with Native nations. We're going to be pursuing this session during the legislature state funding for equine rescues, because we have hardworking equine rescues that really receive little to no government funding, and we want to try to institutionalize that with some state tax dollars. We're going to continue working to secure sanctuary for all of the remaining Alamogordo primate facility chimps who deserve sanctuary. We're going to deliver our wonderful, groundbreaking Animal Connection humane education curriculum in communities all over the state. And in fact, we will be able to do it anywhere in the world, and you'll hear more about that. We're going to maintain all crucial program services and programs. And I say this because it's really, it's worth saying that just maintaining the work that we do in this environment is challenging. And we're not just maintaining, but we're growing some of our programs thanks to your support. We're going to also develop this year and launch what we hope will be a very effective wildlife conflict prevention fund, thanks to the vision of one of our donors, and help landowners on the ground be able to live with the policies that we want that are humane for wildlife, and to be able to help landowners cope with those kinds of policy changes. And you're going to see some expansion into our communities from our animal protection voters staff, and be able to reach out in more rural communities, especially to reach those animal protection voices and voters that we know are out there and just may not have access to us very easily at this point. And then those are our program focuses for this year. And then in terms of sustainability, as our supporters, you deserve to know that we intend to be around as long as our services are needed. And some of the ways that we're going to ensure that is by growing things like our Equine Protection Fund endowment, which funds direct services for equines. We're going to be growing our Animal Protection Voters Endowment to make sure we can continue hard-hitting legislative efforts that are needed now and into the future. And then we're going to grow support for both APNM and APV by reaching out to more of those people that we know care about our programs and program services in the community and looking for their support. So that's our 2021 focus. There's a lot there, and we so appreciate your support in helping us get there. So next, I'm just going to quickly go through, there's 4 more slides, and I'm going to go through them fairly quickly because the wonderful staff that are presenting tonight are going to give you a lot more details about these individual accomplishments that we were able to achieve in 2020. So the first one you'll hear about is Jessica Johnson's going to be talking about the spay-neuter funding mechanism that we were able to get passed after 4 years and what that's going to mean for New Mexico's communities. That's really one of our top achievements for 2020. And I suspect some of you listening today are eager to see that implemented. Another thing in terms of our program achievements, for top achievements for 2020, was our really swift and just absolutely remarkable, jaw-dropping expansion of our equine program services to help people who are struggling from the COVID-19 pandemic and are still struggling, by the way. So you'll hear all kinds of details about just the jaw-dropping outcomes in those cases and what it meant to people that we helped. Tony Quintana is going to talk with us about his really creative plant-based eating program promotion. And then related to the equine services that we delivered, I'm very proud to say that Animal Protection of New Mexico was designated by the Department of Homeland Security, New Mexico's department, as an authorized disaster response organization. And this, we hope, is going to give us some opportunities for some more grant opportunities. So some more top program achievements. we were able to, through the work of our cruelty hotline manager and our chief government affairs officer, and our support of some of you in the Santa Fe community, we were able to secure changes, really remarkable changes to the Santa Fe ordinance to ban all dog chaining and prohibit keeping dogs outside in extreme weather and temperatures. Hopefully this will be a model for other communities in the state. Our chimps team was able to just to continue relentless pressure on NIH, the National Institutes of Health, to send APF chimps to sanctuary. We still have a lot of work to do on that, and we prepped for a lawsuit that you saw we filed just a couple of weeks ago. You will also hear more about our work to convince Game and Fish to adopt a humane euthanasia policy for wildlife after there was a tragic situation with a bobcat who was literally strangled to death. As I mentioned before, maintaining program services was a big accomplishment for us, and that really spanned all kinds of programs and services, and that included our care helpline for domestic violence survivors, our cruelty hotline, our humane communities projects that are featured in several communities around the state, several counties, and are really driven by local needs. And you'll hear a lot more details about that. We launched some really exciting town halls that bring our work in more detail and more focus to you, our supporters. And then the last accomplishment that I'm mentioning here for program side is just our impressive elections activity and engagement on the animal protection voter side, and also engaged in candidate fundraising. So the next two slides are going to be really so those last two focused on the impact that we've made through our programs, but the next two are really what kind of work did we do both on the program side and on the operations side, our sort of back office. How did we contribute to our own sustainability and capacity to do this work well on your behalf? Because you are the people that we represent and work for in addition to the animals. So from a program standpoint, again, just maintaining our work in the COVID-19 environment, I think deserves to be said. And so being able to really just keep doing the work and finding ways to pivot and refocus and adjust has been a big challenge this year. And our staff has risen to the challenge. And I'm so proud of our staff and our board for helping us keep things going so effectively. Some of you may not be aware of it, but we actually established a presence in Washington, D.C. We have a staffer now who is focused on our federal work, and this has made a remarkable difference for us in terms of accessing congressional offices. We also grew our equine endowment. Again, that's to support really a sustainable safety net for equines into the future, because we know these problems aren't going away anytime soon. We created expanded capacity for our Humane Ed program. You'll hear all about that from Sherry Mangold by converting our curriculum to digital format. very, very exciting outcome. And then Animal Protection of New Mexico was deemed a CARE, our domestic violence care program professional services vendor in Bernalillo County. So we hope to be able to apply for some contracts with Bernalillo County. Next slide. And then finally, some operational achievements. And these are a little, sometimes a little more esoteric, but this really speaks to our ability to deliver the programs and services in a very effective and high level way for you, our supporters. So from our operational standpoint, we get an audit done every year. It's required by law. For, I think, the 7th year in a row, we had an unmodified audit, which means our finance team is doing a really remarkable job of keeping track of all the details. We have expanded development capacity, and what that means for you, our supporters, is that we are able to increase our program funding and do a better job of staying in touch with you about what kind of difference you're making on the ground with our programs. We saw growth in our animal protection voters' income and supporters, which we're really proud of. We appreciate everyone understanding the value of supporting both APNM and APV. We adhered to really discerning budget discipline and data-driven decisions so that we can do the very best job for you. We worked on process improvement. We enhanced our system security, which really became important during COVID-19 when there were a lot of people, bad actors out there trying to trick people with online assaults, basically. And then we have dedicated ourselves to strategic planning and doing that annually and updating our plan and staying focused on not just short-term goals, but long-term goals. And then also we launched a new donor database, which translates for you, our supporters, into really streamlined systems and cost savings for you. So I hope that you can see this has been a really remarkable year for 2020, despite all of the challenges that COVID-19 has delivered on our doorsteps. And our supporters have been there for us. We so appreciate you. And I hope you enjoy the rest of this presentation to really emphasize what you've helped us be able to accomplish this year. So next, I'm going to introduce Elizabeth Wolf, who is our Chief Program Services Officer, and she's going to tell you a lot more about all of the valuable program services that we deliver on your behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for this annual meeting. I'd like to begin with just an overview of program services, which is the umbrella for several of APNM's programs. And as Lisa mentioned, it's been a year of adaptation and also some really important outcomes for animals. Chief among those, as Lisa mentioned, was the passage in 2020 of Senate Bill 57, which provides a funding mechanism for low-cost statewide spay-neuter services, which we so desperately need to address our companion animal overpopulation program. The implementation is in process. The Animal Sheltering Committee, which is under the New Mexico Board of Veterinary Medicine, is hard at work on the funding application and implementation process. And stay tuned for updates from APNM and the Vet Board, even as early as next month, on how shelters and rescues and nonprofits may apply for these funds and what the timeline might be for application review, selection, and fund distribution. So stay tuned on that. APNM was also involved in the Vet Board's proposed animal shelter minimum standards. And as you can see on the slide, the public hearing was delayed due to COVID. So you can visit the Vet Board's website for updates and also the proposed standards. And of course, APNM will keep you informed as well. As Lisa mentioned, the Humane Education Program was among the programs that had to pivot quickly and dramatically, because it is normally delivered in person in classrooms with the humane educators and their team of registered therapy dogs. As Lisa mentioned, we are shifting to a virtual and online curriculum, which will be uploaded to a digital platform called Learn Worlds. And I'd like to direct your attention to this photo of the canine students raptly listening to instruction. That's a still from our newest video lesson called Reading to Dogs. Next slide, please. So Humane Communities is one of the programs that Lisa mentioned that has actually grown. It is designed to address specific community local needs to improve animal welfare. And we started with 3 counties, Santa Fe County, San Miguel County, and Valencia County, and the program has grown to now we are working with community partners in McKinley County, in Mora County, in the city of Santa Rosa with San Felipe Pueblo, and also still with Santa Fe County. So I begin with the McKinley County Transport and Spay Neuter Project. We're partnering with the McKinley County Humane Society, and you can see that despite the challenges of COVID-19, their intake was over 3,500 animals. Over 2,800 animals were transported to other shelters, vetted shelters, to improve the animals' chance of adoption. Over 1,400 animals were given spay-neuter surgeries. And APNM's contribution towards this was almost 40,000. And we would like to thank the very generous bequest of a McKinley County resident named Valerie King for supporting this project. Next slide, please. Also in McKinley County is an outreach project that really is designed to go out into the community, identify animals in need, respond to those needs. And some of the activities that the outreach workers are involved in, again, observing COVID-safe protocols, include picking up stray homeless animals on Navajo Nation, vaccinating, deworming, and temporarily housing those animals picked up. The outreach workers also have been delivering needed pet food and human supplies to families who have been isolated during COVID-19, communities such as Pine Hill and Raymond, Navajo, delivering donated dog and cat food to the Gallup Food Pantry. And also the McKinley County Humane Society dedicated one of their shelter vans to the outreach project and equipped it with crates and supplies and whatnot. So next slide. With that, I would like to introduce Program Director Marisa Sleater, who will talk about the Mora County and Santa Rosa and San Felipe Pueblo initiatives. Marisa?
Thanks, Elizabeth. Hello, everyone. So for 2020, in our Mora County Humane Community Program, we worked with the Las Vegas San Miguel Veterinarian Hospital, which serves Mora County area. And they were able to perform 303 spay and neuter surgeries with this funding, 410 rabies vaccinations and other vaccinations. And then also we've had some local volunteers who have been able to help with outreach to the community, letting them know that these services are available. So we're glad to be able to help support that. As you can see, fairly small community with this larger number of spay and neuters. For the city of Santa Rosa, they don't have an animal shelter there. So we in the past have worked with them to set up spay and neuter clinics. And unfortunately in 2020, no spay and neuter clinics did take place due to COVID and funding. But we accomplished some research and partnership with the city there, and we will we'll work together to put on some spay and neuter clinics in 2021. Also for San Felipe Pueblo, we had worked to arrange 3 spay and neuter clinics, which were canceled, also due to COVID. We did coordinate the donation of 100 bales of hay for equines in San Felipe as part of our equine work. And we were able to arrange a donation of 700 doses of frontline flea and tick guard and distributed them, and also yard spray for prevention and health of those animals. All right, thanks.
Okay, the next program we'd like to update you on is our Challenging Animal Cruelty program. And this saw an increase of 35% during COVID. Our cruelty case manager, Alan Edmonds, said that he heard over and over again, people would say, hi, I'm a first-time caller to the hotline. Now that I'm home all the time, I see how my neighbor treats their dog. And indeed, the most common call has been about dog abuse and neglect. Another really important project under challenging animal cruelty is that APNM helps provide training scholarships to animal control officers. And by early 2020, we had registered 7 officers for in-person training. Of course, that got canceled. But fortunately, one of the main agencies that provides ACO training, the National Animal Control Association, pivoted to online instruction. And APNM was able to fund over $9,000 worth of training scholarships to 38 officers in 9 counties. And we're really so grateful for the generous family that supports this really important program. Other activities that APNM was involved in is Alan in particular and other staff people work with communities to revise and even establish animal ordinances in those communities. And Alan spoke in support of a successful ordinance change to the Santa Fe City's animal ordinance, which now has an extreme weather provision and also a ban on all chaining and tethering. So really important outcome there. Also, as Lisa mentioned, APNM was involved in this awful case that some of you may have heard about and followed, where a New Mexico Department of Game and Fish officer responded to a call about a trapped bobcat and actually strangled the animal to death. And after public outcry and a letter from APNM demanding a change, the Department of Game and Fish actually did change their policy on wildlife euthanasia, disallowing this cruel method. Also, the cruelty hotline hosted a really successful virtual town hall meeting, and thank you to those of you who attended. So now I'd like to introduce Program Manager Victoria Murphy, who will tell us about the Humane Communities Santa Fe County Initiative and also the CARE program. Victoria?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. A little bit about the Santa Fe County Initiatives for Humane Communities is this funding is specific to the city of Santa Fe and in Santa Fe County. It was really important for us to reach out to the city and the county to let them know that they had our support in pushing forward on a no tethering or chaining ordinance. And so we work very closely with the animal control entities to get feeds on the folks that really need some assistance in order to get dogs off chains. So the video or the photos that you see in front of you, the top 2 that you see were some dogs that were originally chained. The top right-hand corner that you will see is a black dog tied to a kind of a dilapidated fence. And this dog could sail over that tiny little, it's like a sheep fence, and had a risk of being strangled. And as you can see, because of the chain and the tether, the water bucket was unstable and always knocked over and empty. So we were able to successfully provide that particular fence build. 6 dogs benefited from that fence, which you can see constructed in the middle of your screen, and are no longer tethered on that premise, and that's in Santa Fe County. And there were 2 other fence builds that were completed in 2020, despite the challenges of COVID in making arrangements with builders, social distancing, of course, the whole time. We completed one within the city of Santa Fe, working with city councilors and a recommendation for property that needed some enclosure because of some dogs that their owner had passed and the caretaker could not afford to confine the dogs in any other way. And also in Santa Fe County on the left was another home where there was somebody with failed health, and they could also not afford to provide improvements for their dog's housing. So this project was funded by the Doris Goodwin Walbridge Foundation, and we're so thankful that we're able to do this to be able to make the lives of the animals and the humans that own them more comfortable and certainly more safe. And I also manage the companion animal rescue effort, which is also known as the CARE program. In 2020, we saw a decline in calls due to COVID-19 and people afraid to leave their home environment in fear of getting ill and catching COVID in a shelter. So we're not the only one experiencing that downtake in calls. The shelters themselves are operating at 50% capacity, but are even at that 50% capacity full. So less people are coming into shelter. Despite that, we still handled 45 calls and took care of 68 animals, providing referrals, which could be direct domestic violence resources that clients did not know existed, Red Rover, and other pet-friendly housing that they could exit their current situation in and find safety. We did provide housing for 17 animals that were then reunited with their families. 3 animals in addition to that were transferred into rescue and then adopted, which are pictured on the screen. Cassie, which is the name given to protect the identity of the pet, is shown here with her new pet parent when she could not be reunited with her family. And Rory is in his new home in Colorado alongside of a lake with his new family. So even when we sometimes cannot reunite these pets with their clients, we do make sure to ensure that they have a good life thereafter in their new homes. One of the things that we worked on during COVID-19 is expanding our network of providers. So you'll see a list of what those providers are on the screen. Our list is up to 139 individual providers, which includes individuals and businesses such as veterinary clinics and boarding facilities. We have also expanded our in-kind and non-cash donations to include items from Max and Neo, such as leashes, collars, and discounts on supplies for our foster parents, and also to provide to clients when we're reuniting them with their pet so that they have the supplies that they need. And we've also worked on increasing our grant funding through state and federal funding, as well as through a PetSmart Charities grant, as well as being added to the Bernalillo County Behavioral Health Service as a provider to open up opportunities for more grants. This program is funded primarily through federal and state funding, as well as donor support and through grants that write.
Thanks, Victoria. I'd like to introduce Sherry Mangold, who will wrap up the Program Services Department presentation. Sherry is the Education Outreach Director, and she will tell us about the Humane Education Program. Sherry?
Hi, thank you, Elizabeth. Well, it was interesting. As you know, COVID-19 hit, and in March, we went from what you see listed as our services delivered. This is where we were when all of a sudden the schools closed throughout New Mexico. We were in the middle of programs in Bernalillo County and Mora and San Miguel and Santa Fe and Valencia counties. When COVID hit, I have to tell you and just be honest about this, we were more than upset. It was devastating to our program. However, we did recoup on this, and the famous saying about making lemonade out of lemons is pretty much what happened. Due to the Bonner Family Foundation, which is a name you've heard before, and the other 2 groups and miscellaneous that you see below, and the miscellaneous grants and donors, we were able to go into a virtual program, and we started writing the scripts and filming our lessons. And this began in April, and it continued through the summer. And we managed to film so far 5 of the animal connection lessons. And that also necessitated revising all of our activities and the assignments, the suggested assignments that we provided for our teachers. And that had to be revised because how you do it live in the classroom is certainly very different than how you can do it on a computer screen. We do have two programs, as you can kind of see from the titles, the Animal Connection and the Animal Connection Junior. The Animal Connection program is a 12-week program that runs in the upper grades, and the Animal Connection Junior is the program that is 4 weeks in length and runs in kindergarten through second grade. We still have 3 lessons to get filmed and hope that the donations will continue to come in, which will allow us to do that. And also on this slide, you can see what we had to cancel. And a lot of this is special presentations and summer presentations that we traditionally do. And that also includes much of our work in Pueblos. Our next speaker is Noelle, and Noelle is our policy specialist, and she is our DC office. Noelle?
Hi, everyone. I'm really glad to be here, share a little bit about what's happening on the federal level. As Sherry said, I'm the DC office, and because of that, APNM has really been able to expand our reach across the country. We've got members engaged in California and Illinois and Louisiana, so it's been really great to be closer to Capitol Hill. It's been a little more challenging with COVID, but as everything has. So as you all probably know, we've been trying to get these chimpanzees on Holloman Air Force Base at the Alamogordo Primate Facility to sanctuary. And it's been a very long haul and a hard push, and there are about 3 dozen left there on the Air Force Base, and NIH has said that they can't be moved. And we are doing everything we can to make sure that they retire as they should. They've all been through quite a lot. So we really spent a lot of time this last year really trying to, again, get more members engaged. We got a lot of great media coverage, which helps on multiple levels. It helps engage grassroots. It helps engage members of Congress. We worked with multiple chimpanzee and scientific experts. Chimpanzee veterinarian reviewed medical files. We were able to facilitate through a member of Congress, which was very helpful. And we worked with an animal welfare scientist who looked at the same records the NIH veterinarians reviewed and wrote this really powerful report making a case for why these chimps need to move. And, you know, those scientific and reports and recommendations are really important to help ensure that the members, the congressional members we work with, know that this, you know, goal of moving them is based on fact and science, and it helps give them more support for the efforts that they're making to help move them. So part of that kind of process was also multiple congressional tours of the facility. So Senator Duckworth, Tammy Duckworth, a Democrat in Illinois, one of her staffers went out with Representative Torres Small's office for a tour in December 2019. We also facilitated a tour for Senator Udall and a chimpanzee veterinarian to go last year. And, you know, aside from just, you know, putting out the idea that this tour should happen, there's a lot of background. So we help prep the people going out. We write questions for them. We do follow-up and use all of that information garnered to really help make the case to move the chimpanzees. You may have seen we hosted an amazing event with Senator Udall. So he was our champion on this issue, and he worked really hard to, you know, get these chimpanzees moved before he was retired. So if you haven't seen that, I would highly recommend it. Soon we'll have some little short bits where you can watch just pieces of it if you don't have time to sit down and watch the whole 2-hour program. But it was really a fantastic event that we partnered with him on. We gave some, so as we're supporting chimpanzees, we're also part of that support is making sure there's funding for the Alamogordo chimpanzees at the sanctuary. So that's Chimphaven in Louisiana. And we were able to facilitate a grant for them, which we were very happy about. And, as I mentioned, engaging new partners in the House and the Senate, Democrats, Republicans, really important to get these folks engaged. And, they are still engaged, which is fantastic. I just talked to Senator Lujan's office yesterday and Heinrich, and we've got some other meetings coming up. So, it's been, it's taking some time, but we're confident that we can really make a difference for these chimpanzees. So we're going to show you a quick video, ForgottenChimps.org. We created this to help really kind of engage grassroots effort and have people have a better understanding of the situation that these chimpanzees are in. So you can go ahead and roll that, and I'll stop talking.
Over the years, hundreds of chimpanzees were forced to serve this country, from spaceflight testing to medical research. Finally, in 2015, a landmark decision put an end to the wasteful and inefficient use of these intelligent, sensitive, endangered animals for invasive testing. More than 460 chimps have now reached the National Chimpanzee Sanctuary, but not all of them were so lucky. Right now, there are fewer than 40 chimps languishing in a costly lab on Holloman Air Force Base, funded with your tax dollars. These are the forgotten chimps of Alamogordo. They have served and suffered for this country, and they deserve better. Now, because of government bureaucracy, these last surviving chimps remain abandoned without the expert care they need, and they face rushed deaths by euthanasia. Help us free these forgotten laboratory chimps. Let them live out the rest of their lives in sanctuary, in a natural environment with friends and family. Take action now. Visit ForgottenChimps.org and add your voice to the effort to give our closest relatives the dignity, safety, and care they deserve. Act now. Visit ForgottenChimps.org.
Thank you. Please share that as you can. And now we're going to have Victoria Murphy back to talk more about our Equine Protection Fund.
Thank you all. I want to talk to you a little bit about the Equine Protection Fund, which has really expanded in 2020, specifically due to COVID-19. The majority of individuals that I've provided assistance to in 2020 considers their equines to be part of their family, and it involves some strong emotional bonds between them and their equines. Our applicants relate to their horses, and equines in particular share a similar family structure as with people, and that they typically communicate emotions, they feel empathy, they learn to trust, they show stress, they thrive in open spaces just like we do, and they require social relationships to be healthy and learn by observation. So we are determined to help people protect resources and provide crucial assistance to keep their equines with them in order to protect these really long-term bonds between the owners and the equines. As you can see on this slide, we have really provided a lot of assistance, and there's still a lot to provide. There's folks that have been without work since April, and otherwise without this assistance may have had to place their family members, or some folks have pasture that is no longer grazable because of the drought. So we're not only fighting COVID-19, but we're fighting the drought and a lack of resources to many communities to reach for the food that they need to dry lot feed. So we've provided in 2020 feed assistance to 2,201 equines, and we've provided gelding assistance to 42 equines, veterinary care for 76 equines, and Trails In, which is a humane euthanasia or disposal for 16 equines. And that is for the people that we're helping directly, which is minimally about 939 plus individuals that reside within New Mexico that have received some sort of assistance, as well as our government agencies and equine rescues that are licensed with the New Mexico Licensing Board, as well as the Pueblos, the Zuni Pueblo, the Taos Pueblo, the Rama Navajo chapter, and the San Felipe Pueblo, that we've helped provide some sort of assistance through feed or veterinary care. We have also partnered with growers in New Mexico who have generously donated hay and volunteers around the state to help distribute to communities that are reeling from COVID-19. So the impact has been amazing and more than we anticipated, but yet we've been able to meet the demand and will continue to do so. You can see that we have in 2020 provided 2,327 different instances of aid to equines. So I wanted to share with you a little bit so you can see that one of the horses that we've helped is a horse called Tortilla. Tortilla is a horse that is approximately 29 years old and was applied for assistance. The family member applied for assistance because the equine belonged to her grandmother, and her grandmother passed away in October, who was 100 years old. And this was her grandmother's horse. And her grandmother used to tend her sheep on this horse. And Tortilla is old and blind, and this is in her own words, just like her grandma was. And the assistance allowed her to not only provide meals to the horse, to keep it at home and to keep it healthy, but also provided an ability for her to possibly get him to the vet to take care of his teeth and those things. That's just one story of many to how the help is necessary and impacts some of these families. This is just one of those over 2,000 horses that we've helped in 2020. I'd like to introduce at this time Laura Bonner, who is the Chief Program and Policy Officer. Laura?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Victoria. And it's been such a, Victoria is a hard worker and has, decades of experience working for animals in New Mexico. And so I just want to point to these, the spike here that you see in this graph. So we were able to launch the Equine Protection Fund, only because of dedicated donors who, agreed with this vision of that horses deserve a basic safety net, just like dogs and cats have in New Mexico. We knew that other states were doing this for equines, and we tried to convince other places, including the New Mexico Horse Council. And I think we asked the state to have an equine protection fund like this before we started one ourselves in 2010. And you see the number of equines that we've been helping over these past 10 years, and you see that spike that totally, increased, right, because of COVID. And of course, we couldn't do that without the support of donors, incredible, generous donors who helped us meet this need. People are, a lot of people are going through incredibly difficult times, and so we just are so grateful for all of the supporters who've made it possible for us to be able to respond and support community members this past year. A few more photos. We had partnerships with, of course, we get feed assistance applicants from all over the state, and then we had some relationships with leaders in local tribal governments that then, shifted this past year as we were just trying to help people be able to feed their animals. But we did manage to have a couple of equine health clinics. These were originally kind of envisioned as gelding clinics, but they became more holistic health clinics. These are photos from one of two clinics we did in partnership with the Rama Navajo chapter at their Pine Hill School Farm. And I think 60 equines were served during the course of these two clinics. It's a great community partnership with hard work from the local community and volunteers, and a great veterinarian and volunteers on his side too. So that horse in the middle there is named Onion Ring, which is one of my favorite horse names ever. Anyway, so thank you to everybody who's been making work like this possible in between the lockdowns when we can safely help out. It's been tremendous, and we hope to be able to do more of this kind of work this year and into the future. I know we don't have a ton of time left, so I'll just briefly say there's a lot of work. There's a lot of horses around the state who are wild, either designated under federal law as wild or who are free roaming. Horses probably don't care what you call them. They all deserve dignity, right, and respect. And so there's a variety of ways that we are working to try to protect horses in those situations, including by being part of a collaborative with the Carson National Forest, and by working on to try to protect horses in Sandoval County and Placitas, and also, horses who come out of situations who maybe were removed from the wild and never made it into great adoptive homes. And so there's been a lot of work on that, and thank you very much. And I'd like to turn it over now to Tony Quintana, Plant-Based Eating Program Manager. Thank you, Tony.
Hi, thanks, Laura. Good evening, everyone. Just kind of briefly with the plant-based eating program in 2020, we continued offering, those services and resources that we were doing before the pandemic. Of course, we pivoted to online and virtual formatting. So we offered, a wide variety of webinars and sort of virtual events, cooking demonstrations and so forth. We continue to provide some digital resources on our blog and our website, our dining guide and things like that. We also pivoted to provide plant-based food relief, as Lisa mentioned for the beginning of the meeting. So we identified some places that we could help out and provide assistance. So in July, we began monthly deliveries to the Raymond Navajo community of food bags for 100 families each delivery. And those include lots of fresh produce, so fruits and vegetables, along with some grocery staples, pinto beans, red chili pods, rice, things like that. And then also some other items like some vegan tamales and tortillas and stuff like that. We've been collaborating with some other community organizations for that work as well. And then we've been providing weekly contributions to Albuquerque Mutual Aid to add some fresh produce to the food boxes that folks were getting who are facing some difficulties due to the pandemic. We also were excited to launch our podcast in July. We launched our podcast, Teach Me How to Vegan, which is sort of like a how-to guide for how to switch to a plant-based diet for folks who are interested, but kind of not sure where to start. So we're releasing new episodes every 2 weeks. And in 2020, we did 14 episodes. Before we put our restaurant engagement work on hold when the pandemic started, but prior to March, we were able to work with 3 restaurants on adding some plant-based menu items to their menu as well. And with that, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Jessica Johnson, the Chief Government Affairs Officer with Animal Protection Voters.
All right, thank you, Tony. Hello, everyone, and many of you may be familiar with my work on the Animal Protection Voters legislative work side, but I also oversee a lot of our wildlife program work. So one of the big victories that came out of 2020, which was previously mentioned, and is one of several examples, I think, of the connection between the cruelty hotline that takes in calls and reports of concern for animal abuse and neglect, and how that translates to the policy side. So with my APV hat on, I get to work a lot with Ellen Edmonds, our cruelty case manager. And this was one of those cases. We heard a report of a Department of Game and Fish officer that responded to a complaint about a bobcat that had been around sort of an urban and golf course area in Alamogordo. And the officer responded and took custody of the bobcat, and to basically dispose of the bobcat, strangled the animal to death with the catch pole that he had. So understandably, there was a lot of concern about this, and we, issued a letter and communicated with the department about how this really needs to change. And we were very happy to receive word that actually, well, we weren't happy about this part. The department did not have any kind of euthanasia policy in place to begin with, but they did agree that they would take one on. And they did implement this internal policy that their officers will always use AVMA approved methods of euthanasia. So this was a good outcome. It is not perfect. There is still plenty to say about the fact that we think that the Department of Game and Fish is too quick to euthanize wild animals in the first place, when prevention methods and relocation are good options to consider. But if euthanasia does need to happen, it absolutely should be done by approved methods. So that was a great outcome. We also, over the course of the last year, kept track of the case with the trapper who set the neck snare that caught and killed Roxy, the dog pictured here on your screen, on public lands in 2018. Throughout 2019, we were following the case, and much to our dismay, the case was dismissed when a judge ruled that the Department of Game and Fish had illegally and improperly collected and handled evidence in that case. So up until this point, that individual that killed Roxy has not faced any legal consequences. But we have monitored the situation, and we did learn late last year that the department did refile charges, or the prosecutors did refile charges. And so that case is going to be ongoing in 2021, and we're going to keep watching for that. Like Lisa mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, there's been an effort over the past year and a continuing effort to develop a new resource for the state to help individuals prevent conflict with wildlife in order to try to provide more live outcomes for these animals. But really a lot of 2020's work was also working toward 2021 and that legislation that we are working on to ban traps, snares, and poisons on public lands. There was a lot of intense work, especially with the media and outreach, and I'll get into that when I move to the Animal Protection Voters annual meeting presentation. But for now, I will stop here.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lisa, and the APNM staff for sharing such powerful information about the work in 2020 and giving us an idea of what's planned for 2021. And from here, we will move right into Animal Protection Voters, our legislative arm's annual meeting. And now I'm going to turn it over again to Jessica, our Government Affairs Officer, who will highlight past legislative successes and discuss the crucial 2021 New Mexico legislative session. Go take it away, Jessica.
Thank you, Dorothy. Okay, so for Animal Protection Voters, it was, well, like everything else, it was a big year. It was an interesting year. So first, we want to talk about what happened in 2020. And every year starts with a legislative session. In 2020, it was the short 30-day state legislative session. And for the fourth time in a row, I believe, if I'm doing my math correctly, we introduced the Affordable Spay-Neuter Funding Mechanism Bill. And that year it was Senate Bill 57. And the sponsors were Senator Jacob Candelaria and Representative Joanne Ferrari. And this campaign is probably one of the biggest legislative pushes that we've made in recent years in terms of just pulling out all of the tools out of the toolbox. So one thing that we were really excited to do was, I believe for the first time ever, we ran a TV ad in support of one of the bills that we were lobbying for. So it was the Save NM Pets ad that ran on TV and also on digital media that you could find on your computers like YouTube. There was a website landing page. We did a big push on social media as well. Lots of outreach to traditional media. The Albuquerque Journal was, put their support behind this bill and published pages of letters to the editor, and their own editorial board weighed in support of the bill. We were on morning TV, local morning TV. You can see us there with one of our little humane education pups. And I have the honor of serving as an expert witness on the House floor when the House debated on the bill. And that was the moment that we knew this bill passed, and then it made its way to the governor's office. And so then at that point, we had another wave of push to urge the governor to sign the bill, which included a lot of grassroots advocacy from people like you. We also put together a support packet. There was a wonderful class of students that signed this card that we made urging the governor to sign the bill. It was really, really amazing. Another big part of every legislative session is our Animal Protection Day, our lobby day. And so this was an amazing event where we did a couple of things for the first time. One, we hosted it out of our Santa Fe office instead of the Para building across the street. Everyone really seemed to enjoy that, and I think it made it a little bit more cozy and energizing. We had, for the first time, other shelters and rescue organizations kind of join us to be part of the day, and we all tabled together in the roundhouse to hand out information about the life-saving work that they and other animal shelters and rescues are doing, and why we all supported Senate Bill 57. And the great news is that the governor signed the bill. So after 4 years of effort, it took effect July 1st of 2020, and that set the wheels turning for the relevant state agencies to put the rules in place that they needed in order to carry out the law. And so that's been happening. The spay neuter fees, which are collected by the New Mexico Department of Agriculture, have been collected starting January 1 of this year. And so, like Elizabeth mentioned earlier, the Board of Veterinary Medicine and its Animal Sheltering Committee are doing the work in order to get ready to get those funds out to spay neuter service providers. Other major successes, the Wildlife Trafficking Act also passed last year, really cracking down on the international trade of a lot of exotic animals and animal parts, a lot of them being, threatened species. That was a wonderful effort championed by Senator Mimi Stewart. We also, as we have been doing for several years, we continue to fight for some additional special funds for our state's horse shelters, licensed horse shelters, who are doing amazing work with very little support from government budgets, unlike many dog and cat shelters. We weren't able to be successful last year, but we're not giving up. There were some other issues that we supported as well that didn't cross the finish line. We'll keep fighting there. And then, as mentioned earlier, we had a great success at the local level. So the Santa Fe City Council and the mayor voted to approve multiple changes to the city ordinance, including prohibiting all dog chaining, making sure that dogs would not be left outside in freezing weather or boiling hot weather, and also allowing law enforcement officers to enter onto a property. If there's an animal in imminent harm, they can just go and save that animal. So it's a big deal. There's some screenshots of our cruelty case manager, Alan, and I testifying before City Council. And it was a great outcome. So at that point, if we're following the timeline, then coronavirus hits. The session ended, the governor signed our spay-neuter bill. I remember Alan and I being at that city council meeting where the vote happened on that ordinance in Santa Fe, and things were just starting to get scary. And it was kind of like, should we be here? Feels like we shouldn't be here. And probably the next day or two is when things started to officially shut down. So at that point, we had to pivot so much of our work. And, the next step usually for animal protection voters' work, once the session finishes in an election year, is to look towards the election, because we want to make sure that the legislators voting yes on the pro-animal bills get reelected, that pro-animal candidates are getting elected to any open seats. But it was really challenging because so much of electoral work, the fundraisers, getting out the vote with door to door, it's all in person. And we had committed to doing at least one fundraiser. The first fundraiser that we did for the Speaker of the House, Brian Egolf, was right after things shut down. And there was a moment of, well, what do we do? Do we cancel? Because everyone else seems to be canceling. And I think I was told that we were the first folks to pivot to a virtual fundraiser at the state level here in New Mexico. So we are intrepid and we want to support our animal champions. So that's what we did. We ended up doing 3 last year, and it ended up being really successful. And there was a lot of interest, not just in the state, but across the country on some of the issues that we're working on. And we were able to raise a lot of support for the candidates who needed it in order to get reelected or get elected so that they could be in those elected seats to vote yes on animal bills. We also had an opportunity, you can see my little face there on Twitter, did a little promo video for Congresswoman Deb Haaland, who is now appointed to be the next Department of Interior Secretary. So it's really exciting to see New Mexico leaders and humane New Mexico leaders rising up in the nation. We also got out our scorecard, and because timing was, we were trying to navigate the timing this past year with all of the COVID impacts. We ended up doing 2 versions of our 2020 scorecard. We did a preview in the late summer. And then we did a full scorecard right at the end of the year, because we wanted to be able to have as much information as possible about what the 2021 legislative session was going to look like, because we know a lot of people look to our scorecard to figure out what lies ahead for the next session. And that scorecard had a great, rundown of our victory in 2020, the spay-neuter bill. So then we did a lot of working towards 2021. We knew that our top priority was going to be banning traps, snares, and poisons on New Mexico's public lands. And you can see that, our media outreach was really pervasive in the fall. And it's almost just, how do I say, we're responding to the fact that dogs are being trapped and people are finding wildlife in traps and people are finding dead, trapped wildlife. We don't have to make up the stories. They come to us and we're just telling them so that people can be aware, and they can be also aware of the legislative solution. The Albuquerque Journal, again, their editorial board has been supportive of this effort. I also had a chance to join the moved to Facebook Live, not live on the in-person on PBS, New Mexico in Focus to talk about the bill. In the upper right corner of that picture, you can see Representative Christine Chandler from Los Alamos, one of the bill sponsors. We also were able to reaffirm the support for the bill from our state land commissioner, Stephanie Garcia Richard, and she put out this great public statement expressing her support for Roxy's Law and that she would continue to support it during the legislative session. So here is what we are looking at for the 2021 legislative session. So the Roxy's Law, which, the formal name is the Wildlife Conservation and Public Safety Act, has been filed as Senate Bill 32. The lead sponsor on that bill is Senator Bobby Gonzalez from Rancho State House. And a Senate co-sponsor is Senator Brenda McKenna from Corrales. And then we have House co-sponsors who were lead sponsors in previous years when the bill started in the House. Representative Chandler, as I just mentioned, and also Representative Matthew McQueen from Galisteo. So that bill is filed and in the process. I'll talk more about it later. But before I focus completely on Roxy's Law, I want to talk about some of the other things going on. So again, we're still investigating any avenues that we might have to be able to get some support for the horse shelters that have been helping to provide for homeless horses, especially during this pandemic. There's also some efforts that are still in the works. The bills haven't been introduced yet. We're still finalizing things with the partners that we're working with, but it includes cage-free egg-laying hen legislation to require that eggs sold in New Mexico and raised in New Mexico by a large egg producer would have to be cage-free. And then there's also kind of a multi-piece bill that adjusts a few things in our wildlife statute, some of which we're really excited about. So once that's filed, we'll be able to talk more about the details of that. And then there's some issues that have been, some bills that have been introduced, some beneficial bills to animals. The Environmental Database Act would create a centralized multi-agency database that would just allow more agency planning and monitoring and also public access to information about things, including wildlife and habitat data. Senate Bill 103 is a bill that would restrict the neonicotinoid pesticides that have caused bee and other pollinator populations to decline so much in recent years. And then there's some bills that will be stepping up to fight. There are a couple of proposed constitutional amendments to establish a right to hunt and harvest wildlife. These are measures that will they differ slightly, but in general, they're talking about making it so that hunting is the preferred way to manage wildlife. So only lethal methods. There's also a part of it is really aiming to try to prevent laws from being passed. Like a ban on traps and poisons, like a ban on coyote killing contests, which we were successful in passing in 2019. So we'll be opposing those. There's also House Bill 101, and maybe, we usually see a trickling of other similar-ish bills related to the horse racetracks in New Mexico. A lot of these measures seem to be focused on helping the racetracks survive financially through artificial means, adding these incentives in order, to provide more gambling opportunities so the racetracks can make more money. We don't support this because ultimately what happens at horse racetracks is by and large cruel. And I know myself and several of our staff could probably talk for at least an hour about all of the details about the cruelty that is practically inherent in the horse racing industry. And so it's really hard for us to see these bills and not speak up and say something. So that's on our opposed list. Okay, so Senate Bill 32, Roxy's Law. I just want to talk about what the bill does. So the bill starts with a blanket prohibition. It says you cannot use any traps, any snares, any wildlife poisons on public lands. And the definition of public land is also defined in the bill. And public land does not include the inside of a structure that might be built on public land. And it does not include sovereign Indian Nation tribe or Pueblo lands. So it starts with that blanket prohibition that you can't use these devices, but then it has a list of exceptions for when you can use those devices in certain circumstances. And you know, I just want to note that this is one of those bills where if we had it our way, these devices would be banned, period, statewide. You know, there would be very, very limited exceptions. But this is also a very difficult bill to pass legislatively. Our neighbors to the north and the west, Colorado and Arizona, were successful in banning these devices in the mid-90s, but they did so via a ballot measure. Voters got to choose to prohibit these devices. We don't have that option in New Mexico, so we have to work within the legislative process, which makes it a little bit more complicated. And you know, we're having to navigate the playing field. So you can see the list of exceptions there. It includes, you know, that the bill won't apply to birds, fish, or rodents not classified as fur bearers. So any rodents that aren't beavers, muskrats, or nutria. There's exceptions for protecting human health, an exception for ecosystem management if there, you know, needs to be work to actually conserve habitats and wildlife. This would include, you know, for example, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, when they capture and put GPS collars on Mexican wolves, their best and preferred tool is a leg hold trap. So they would be allowed to continue to do that. There's scientific research. There are instances where landowners have complaints about carnivore species coming after their crops or livestock. So the department could themselves with their professionals use non-lethal traps or snares. Cage traps would still be allowed for animals to protect crops or livestock. And also, of course, to recover lost or feral domestic animals. So if someone's running a TNR program, a trap neuter return for feral cats on public lands, or a rescue organization is trying to capture a lost dog on public lands, cage traps would be able to be used. There's also an exception for enrolled members of an Indian Nation, tribe, or Pueblo for religious or ceremonial purposes. And this is something that felt really important to a lot of the advocates here in New Mexico to respect that and also reflect that notion that's already been accepted at the federal level. So for example, under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, enrolled members of Native American tribes can possess eagle feathers where other people can't. So that has been worked into the bill. If there is a violation of the law, there are misdemeanor penalties for each violation. And then the bill takes effect April 1st, 2022. So one of the things that we have heard, and I'm sorry, I didn't realize that the sun would be going down, so I might be having a mood lighting effect right now. One of the things that we've heard is that, you know, well, the Department of Game and Fish made some regulatory changes last year. So let's wait until those take effect before we pass this law. So those regulatory changes included some very minor changes. There was a setback added 75 feet away from trailheads. There's now mandatory trapper education in order for a trapper to get a license. There were also some really backwards things, changing the requirement to check a trap once every calendar day to once every 2 calendar days if it's underwater. So, the thinking with those regulations passing was that that this might prevent future. There were also a couple of very small closures in places where the Game Commission thought they were heavily recreated areas. So the idea was that these changes will make it so that people and traps will not come into contact in the future. So if you can see the screen in front of you, those are the incidents that we have heard about since November 1st of last year. So in just the first half of the trapping season, which started November 1st, 2020, and is continued through now, it'll end in March, we have seen more incidents than in entire years in past years. So we look at this and it seems pretty evident that the regulations are not working. Why has there been an uptick? Perhaps because during this pandemic, going for a walk outside in the mountains or in the desert is one of the few safe things that you can do outside your home. A lot of people also adopted dogs during the pandemic, right? So we have a hunch that there has been an increased use in public lands. And this is important because this is something that the state as a whole already expects and is trying to grow in the future. The state of New Mexico wants to grow our outdoor recreation and tourism economies. And so, we think these incidences will just continue to increase as time goes on. And you can see the variety there. It's everything from people's own dogs being caught in traps, finding a loose dog in a trap. A hunter reported to us that during a hunt, his bird dog was caught in a trap. The most recent incident was a family who lives out in a rural area in Dixon. And one of their dogs got out of their yard and disappeared overnight during the blizzard that happened a few nights ago in that area. And then they found her the following morning in an arroyo, choking, still alive. They were able to save her. She did survive, but it was a really traumatic experience for the family. And now, wouldn't you know, we have a new advocate in favor of Senate Bill 32, and she's contacted legislators about it. So here's the path for this bill. So the bill's been introduced and it's been referred to 2 Senate committees, the Senate Conservation Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee. If it passes those 2 committees, it then has to be voted on by the full Senate. And if it passes the full Senate, it then goes over to the House and has to go through the same committee process and a full House floor vote as well. And then, of course, if the bill is passed by the entire legislature, then the governor will need to take action, either sign or veto the bill. So you can see that big red arrow. We are here. We've been waiting for a Senate Conservation Committee hearing. We have been delayed throughout this week, despite being on the committee schedules. They were not able to get to our bill, but we are listed first on Tuesday of next week. So we're very hopeful that we will be heard, and fingers crossed we will get a majority vote and move out of that committee and on to the next process. We've got, I don't know the math, it's a 60-day session, and we're about a week and a half into it. The session ends March 20th at noon, and if the bill passes, then the governor's action deadline is April 9th. So that's kind of the path that lies ahead for that bill. So how you can help, we have an action page set up for Roxy's Law. It's apvnm.org/no traps. I think you have to capitalize the N and the T. apvnm.org, no traps. Really easy way to contact your senator about this bill. We've also got weekly live updates and phone banks happening every Wednesday from 4 to 6 p.m. Where unless I'm in committee testifying on a bill, I'll be there to just give a live update on how the session is going, answer your questions, and then we all take some time to just call some of our supporters in some key districts and make sure that they're making their voices heard by contacting their legislators. If you're interested, you can contact Paige Ryan, our wonderful program associate who is helping to make those events happen. And then the next APNM town hall scheduled for February 25th is going to be focused on APV and the legislative session. So that would be another opportunity for you to tune in. I'll get really into depth on how things are going. I'll just mention real quickly, if you do have questions later, you can always email me. I'm at jessica@apvnm.org. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for sharing the highlights of the past legislative session successes and providing such incredibly valuable information about this year's legislative session. And now I just wanted to thank everybody for taking the time to be here with us today. We appreciate all of you and all you do for animals in New Mexico, and hope you have a great evening.